Welcome back. President Joe Biden's 100-day deportation moratorium seeking to protect undocumented immigrants from deportation was recently barred by a federal judge in Texas. What does this mean to Bronx immigrants, and how did the executive order and organization UnLocal recently help stop the unlawful deportation of a local Bronxite? Joining us now to share more is Rebecca Press, Legal Director at UnLocal Inc. Welcome, Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. For those who are not familiar, can you just tell us about UnLocal and your mission?
Sure. UnLocal is what we like to call a small but mighty organization that combines two critical components of defending immigrant rights. One is access to legal representation, and the other is community education and outreach. So we have and they're on equal footing. They're both equally important, the access to good legal representation, as well as informing communities about what's going on in the world of immigration, how to protect yourself. And so we try to combine both, recognizing that both are very important.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And as we said in the beginning, President Biden, one of his first official enactions when he became the president was the 100-day deportation moratorium. What does this mean for the undocumented community? What exactly is the deportation moratorium?
Sure. Well, the deportation moratorium, as you said, was meant to be a 100-day pause on removals. Who that impacted would be folks who already have been ordered removed. So they already have a final order of removal for a whole host of reasons. It would prevent their actual deportation. But that was only one component of the memo that was issued. The other component of the memo, which continues to operate in full force, is a reassessment of priorities. So if you may or may not remember, but under the Obama administration, there were very clear priorities, recognizing that the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration Enforcement just simply doesn't have the resources to prioritize all undocumented immigrants. The Obama administration also created a framework through which to prioritize who they should go after. Trump undid that and said, we're going after everyone always. Biden then through this memo is attempting to revisit the priorities and think through, understanding the limited resources, who should the enforcement focus on. That part of the memo remains good law and is set to take effect on February 1st. The 100-day pause on deportations, which is of critical importance, and truly we all know that the removal of someone, it has devastating impact on families and communities. So the 100-day pause, while certainly I wouldn't suggest goes far enough, certainly was a very good start and really, really important. That part of the memo has been enjoined by the federal court judge in Texas. And so for the time being, is not as powerful as we'd hope it to be. I will say that the injunction is at this point, is only good for 14 days. And the other really important thing to note is, even before this memo, ICE has always had the authority and the discretion to not deport people. They always have that ability. They always have the ability to release people from detention and to decline to deport. This memo attempted to make it mandatory to revisit that sort of on an agency-wide basis. But even removing the legal weight of this memo, they still have the ability to make these exact same decisions in individual cases.
Thank you so much for the background, Rebecca. And we know one of your recent cases involved actually a Bronxite, Javier Castillo Maradiaga. Rebecca, can you tell us more about this particular case and what happened there, in the middle of the 100-day deportation moratorium?
Sure. So Javier has been in this country since he was 7 years old. He was ordered removed when he was 9. This, despite the fact that his parents were at the time living here lawfully and continue to live here lawfully. He, however, was not eligible for the same status that they had and was ordered deported. Fast forward a few years, and he became eligible for DACA, which he applied for and received. In 2019, his DACA status lapsed, and subsequent to that, he had an interaction with the NYPD. That interaction led the NYPD to inappropriately turn him over to ICE. And that was because of the old order of removal, we believe. They turned him over to ICE, where he's been detained ever since. During the length of his detention, as we know, the entire world was deeply affected by the COVID pandemic, as was he, right? And during that time, he was also fighting the criminal charges that were against him. I bring up the pandemic because the pandemic led to a much slower process in the adjudication of the criminal proceeding. His criminal case was dismissed and sealed at the beginning of this year, and he was moved to Louisiana for final removal, essentially, right at the same time that we were transitioning from Trump to Biden. So he was sent from the New York detention facility, where he had spent approximately 14 months, to Louisiana, which is the last place people go before they're sent to their country of origin, just a few days before Biden's inauguration. He was set to be removed on January 22nd, and on January 21st, the new administration signed the memo with the 100-day pause. So the timing of it all was, everything was cut very, very close. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the flights that were scheduled for the 22nd were rescheduled, they were canceled, but then he was put onto another flight for the 25th. So that, and we were not given assurances that he would not be on that flight on the 25th, even though he should be covered by this 100-day pause, because remember, that was before the injunction, right? The injunction just happened yesterday. He's covered by the pause. We were not given assurances that he wouldn't be on the flight. And in fact, he was told repeatedly that he would be on the flight. Mm-hmm. So that's why between the 22nd and Sunday, the 24th, I think it was, we were compelled to organize and engage community and do the rally that we did to get a lot of attention onto his case, because he shouldn't have been on that flight. And ultimately he wasn't on the flight. And he's now since been returned to the New York area.
Got it. And how did UnLocal learn about Javier's case? If you can share, Rebecca.
Sure, absolutely. So UnLocal is part of a collaborative called the Rapid Response Legal Collaborative, which is made up of UnLocal, Make the Road New York, and NYLAG. It's frankly a very small collaborative, and it's meant to provide legal assistance to folks who are post-final order. So individuals who have already been ordered removed and who are at imminent risk of being deported. Through that collaborative, I would be remiss not to mention another component of this. Because of that collaborative, we are known to do this kind of work together with Make the Road and NYLAG. There's another organization in New York called the Immigrant Defense Project, which is a fantastic organization that does a lot of work around the intersection between the criminal legal system and the immigration system. They operate a hotline, and Javier's mother called their hotline. Through that hotline, and because of our work with Rapid Response, IDP referred the case to us, which is how we got involved. And we only became involved, I want to say, about 2.5 weeks ago. So really, really very recently.
Yeah, super important work. And, thank you for sharing that as well. Something else I wanted to ask, I know you mentioned this earlier, Rebecca, in one of the questions, but can the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, aka ICE, act independently regardless of executive orders by the president himself? And could they have wrongfully deported Javier and many others without any repercussions if UnLocal and other organizations hadn't gotten involved?
Sure. It's a great question. I mean, I want to say that the answer is no, that they can't act independently or sort of in violation of executive orders. I think they would say, well, we're not, because the legal question about the legal validity of this memo is still open. What ICE can always do is exercise its discretion in a way that recognizes people's humanity and in a way that recognizes that the work that they do destroys families and destroys communities. So they always can do that. And that's what they should be doing. But they don't do that. Could others have been deported? Of course. I mean, what we learned that not only was Javier not put on this plane to Honduras, but that the whole flight to Honduras was canceled on the 25th. I don't know how many other people were meant to be on that flight, but we feel very fortunate that we played a part in canceling that flight altogether. And certainly, I have absolutely no doubt that there are people who will be wrongfully deported because they don't have the benefit of having a well-connected organization and family support and community support, or they don't have the benefit of having that and sort of the ability to galvanize an entire community around them. And you shouldn't need that to prevent a deportation that is already prevented by the moratorium.
Right. And I want to also bring up that Javier's case isn't an isolated one. Many Bronxites are facing very similar situations and fears. Rebecca, can you please share what their rights are at this moment? I know a lot of people are unsure of what their rights are when it comes to ICE.
Sure, absolutely. So a couple of things to say. First of all, if you or anyone you know has already been ordered removed, I would encourage you to reach out to the Rapid Response Legal Collaborative. And you can find out how to do that by visiting our website, unlocal.org, by visiting Make the Roads website, or by visiting NILAG's website. The people who are at most risk are those who have already been ordered removed. But what to do if ICE comes to your door? The simple answer is do not open your door. You are under no obligation to allow ICE to enter your home, whether it's an apartment, whether it's a full house. You are under no obligation to allow them in. If they have a warrant, a legally issued warrant by a judge, they will enter your house with or without your permission. So if you do not allow them, if you do not consent to their entry, they will not be able to enter your home. And they need to be able to do that in order to identify either you or another individual in your home who may be undocumented. If ICE does come to your home, I would suggest recording the incident. I would also suggest informing the Immigrant Defense Project hotline, because they keep track of all of this. And as you can see in Javier's case, by communicating with IDP's hotline, Javier's family was able to tap into legal resources, right? And community resources. So if you have an experience like that, I would definitely recommend contacting that hotline and then perhaps you'll be tapped into the larger legal community. But certainly there are also the Brooklyn Defender Services came up with an incredible video series about what to do if ICE comes to your door. And I would absolutely suggest watching those. They are in multiple languages. They're called We Have Rights. I think it's wehaverights.org, and in many, many different languages. And I would suggest that everyone watch them.
Perfect. We'll be sure to share that with the viewers as well. Thank you, Rebecca. And can you also please share the hashtag halt all deportations and hashtag not one more actions, and why the fight is not over, and how people in the community can also help regardless of their immigration status during this time?
Oh, absolutely. The fight is obviously not over, right? We have a district court judge who enjoined this 100-day pause. What that theoretically means is that removals will continue and that nothing has really changed. We are still in the battle for people's lives and for the lives of communities. Not one more refers to not one more deportation. With regards to Javier's specific case, we are, there's legal strategy and there's community engagement strategy, which we're still developing. And to the extent that we do anything more, we will certainly let everyone know. Everyone can follow us on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. But there are always ways to get involved, regardless of lawful status. And I would suggest reaching out to us to find out more about our community education programs. Certainly, we are always wanting and willing to do more education and more outreach. And there are other community-based organizations across the city. If there's one thing New York doesn't lack, it's immigrants and community-based organizations. Yeah. So there are ways to tap in.
Thank you, Rebecca. And just how can folks get in touch with UnLocal, learn more about any resources and immigration assistance, any numbers or websites that you can provide, please?
Sure, absolutely. Our website is unlocal.org. That's UNLOCAL.org. And our phone number is 646-216-8210. And we're obviously all over social media. So please visit us.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for your time today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Rebecca Press is the legal director at UnLocal Inc. And we also want to share those numbers. If you have any immigration concerns, you can call UnLocal's main number at 646-216-8210 or their hotline at 212-946-0351. You can also visit unlocal.org to find out more. We'll be right back.